It's dark outside. Raining. For once, I'm not in it. As I write this, I'm sitting in some out-of-the-way bar, stinking of musk, cigarette smoke, sex, and, of course, alcohol. The people here are few, but all leave an impression. An old war veteran who yells at no one about his time in war, about the people he's killed or the lives he's saved by his sacrifices. They're lies, of course, not because I can hear the tremble in his voice as he spouts them, but because I was there when he was deployed, and I saw him hide behind cover when the bullets started flying. He took a stray shot to the leg and got sent home, and was happy for it too. The bartender is a corpulent fellow with a few addictions he'd rather not anyone else know about, but you can see some of them in his bloodshot eyes. A couple of women lined the back wall, dressed in a manner that would denote a certain occupation meant for less reputable people. But those people were here, if anywhere. And then there was him. A tall, dark-haired man with bags under his eyes, a bottle of liquor in his hand, having neglected the drinking glass. He waves the bottle wildly as he tells the veteran to shut up about his horseshite stories, and he spits on the floor lamenting the pathetic state of the world, of politics, of people, and his own ex-wife. It was all her fault, of course. He was going to be a big actor with a big role to play. He was going to be a star. He was going to become famous and make his name known to the world. And he'd have done it all if it hadn't been for everyone else in his life holding him back, be it his father, his mother, his ex-wife, his better-than-him sister. None of it was his fault. All the whoring, the drinking, the drug abuse and debt, none of it was him. All circumstance, all someone else's doing. Some injustice in the world. It won't be long now, I think. He's reaching the crescendo of his tirade. When the bartender finally tells him it's time for him to pack it up, he'll look back at the prostitutes in the back hungrily seeking some pleasure tonight to distract him from his frustrations. And then his eyes will find me. Some common woman sitting in a lonely booth with only a glass of water in front of her in this book that I write in. He'll be captivated by my pale eyes. He'll tell me some elaborate story about how famous he once was, how he was set to star in some superhero movie until the role was swept out from under him, again, not his fault, and about how I'm a babe and how he would maybe put in a word with his agent to get me an audition. I have a body and face made for movies. He's said all this before, too. It's what he has to say. It's how he copes. But I'll indulge him. I'll let him enjoy his ego trip. I'll hang on to every word of his tragic tale of his fall from stardom. I'll play the invested patron to his monologue. Then he'll invite me to his apartment for a night of fun. And I'll accept, and when we get there, he'll go to his bathroom to freshen up. And then his body will cease to function. His heart will go into cardiac arrest, and he'll collapse, calling out for help. I'll kneel beside him, and I will help him, and walk out the door with his soul in my arms. Moments like these are rather common. Humans have limited vision beyond themselves. Life has to run the course they dream for themselves, and when it doesn't, rather than reflect on their errors or perhaps a means to better their experience, it must be the fault of others around them. Humanity, they are the true masters of their own fate, and all other people are merely side actors or villains trying to prevent them from achieving their desired ends. Yes, even their ends are theirs to craft, and as such, they don't recognize me when I'm standing right in front of them. I'm not supposed to be where they don't want me, after all. Even death becomes just another meaningless fling, another entity to impress and stand over. I don't always indulge humans like this, call this an act of whimsy if you like, and I confess that I take a strange sense of delight in crashing the hype, so to speak. There's something so cathartic about seeing the egos of humans shatter like glass. No, I shouldn't be so callous. I wouldn't want you to get the wrong idea. Of course I care, and if you've read my diary up to this point, dear reader, then you'll know that I've had a few much more kind and heartful encounters than this one. I actually recall one a few years ago. It was in a Missouri town on a summer afternoon. There was this old man sitting on a park bench, cane in hand, watching the summer pass him by. People running, walking dogs, throwing balls or toys back and forth, the all-surrounding melody of birds, singing, and people speaking and laughing. He was watching it all and just remembering. He was remembering his time in the Marines, his time raising 3 wonderful children, all of whom were grown by now. His time holding his first grandson in his arms for the first time. He remembered his beautiful wife of 47 years finally passing away in her sleep in a hospital room. He lived a very long but lonely life. His children now live too far away to visit him often, and his grandchildren are now growing up far away. The oldest, he believes, is preparing to start college. He doesn't even know what they look like now. So lost in his own thoughts, he barely noticed the little boy climbing onto the bench next to him. But when he did notice, he smiled at the child and asked him what his name was. I didn't answer him right away. I don't like lying. But I told him I didn't answer him right away. I don't like liars. But if I told him who I was, it might have unnerved him. I just shrugged and smiled, which he took as a sign of childish innocence, and dismissed it. He then asked why I was there. I didn't want to tell him that either. It's hard to answer questions like that. So I told him he looked like he was lonely. And he was, of course, but an adult won't admit that to a child. He shook his head, adjusted the hold on his cane, and continued watching the summer day pass him by. He told me he wasn't that lonely, he was just tired and needed to sit down. So I told him I wanted to do the same, because I was tired too, which is also true. He asked where my mother was. Such a unique question. My mother. Well, to a philosopher one might argue that my mother is life itself. Where life creates, I am inevitable. So as a result, death must be born from life itself. I mentally picture myself as an infant in the arms of Mother Nature, and I smile to myself, but I jest. In the literal sense, I have no mother. I told him I didn't know who my mother was, which I think he took in a different way than I meant. He apologized to me, needlessly, of course. I held no ill will or issue with what he'd asked. It was amusing. But we sat there in silence for a while. Time waits for no one, though, and sure enough, I could see the old man beginning to sweat. His heart was struggling to beat. His time was coming to a close, and his eyes were getting heavy. His arm hurt, and he felt like there was a weight on his chest. He let out a few short gasps and gripped his arm. I took his hand quickly and held it firmly, smiling up at him encouragingly. "It's going to be okay," I told him. He stared at me, and then, in that moment, he saw me. I wasn't some little boy to him, some lost child with no mother. He knew who I was, and all the answers came flooding to him. I thought perhaps he might scream, or beg, or argue, or plead, some even negotiate, which I find needless. It's pointless. I can't be negotiated with. Instead, he just sighed with relief, leaning back in the bench as I felt his soul slipping towards me, almost as if it was waiting for me to be there. "Where have you been?" he asked me. I didn't answer the question. He didn't need it. I was just watching him. He was happy and sad. No, he wasn't either. He was a mixture of emotions that meld together like paint colors being swirled together to create something new and completely unrecognizable. His soul flowed into my waiting arms like water, and I stood up and I left. Someone would notice him in about 10 minutes or so. Notice that the old man had dropped his cane and wasn't moving to get it. They would assume he was sleeping until they realized he wasn't breathing. Forgive me, the man at the bar is shouting now with the bartender. It's very distracting. He's noticed me now, though, so time is running short. Regrettably, I have no words of wisdom to convey in this entry. There is no meaning to it all, and no hidden virtues that I can offer, at least none that I can deduce. I write this simply out of frustration. Humanity may have eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, yet this did not grant them the vision to see the world as I do, to see life as I do. The old man on a park bench who had lived a long and fulfilling life saw a beautiful summer day at the park as a place of memories, remorse, and meditation, a place to think and to appreciate. But the young man throwing a tantrum in a bar over his failings lacks even the sight to see his mistakes lie no further than a simple glance in a mirror. A life squandered in the name of vanity and base self. I was going to call it self-love, but that doesn't quite fit. For a man who loved himself would treat himself better. Perhaps self-lust. Lust and love sometimes get so intertwined in meaning that humans don't know the difference. But there is a difference. And someday I'll share the difference, but not right now. As I said, time is short. Yes, time is so very short. Perhaps that is the wisdom I can leave in this entry, if any is to be taken. The time you have is short. Years pass before your mind and heart are prepared for them. Your sufferings will feel like eons, but your pleasures will pass like seconds. The concept of time is lost on humanity so frequently, and in that little time you have, what will you use it for? I'm not, of course, recommending that you rush through life. Far from it. It's something to be appreciated at a steady pace. But how will you spend that pace? What will you do? Will you live it with an open heart? With a conscious mind and a hopeful smile, prepared to share your time with the people around you, wanting to be in it? So when that day comes that your time ends, you have little, if any, regrets holding you back. Or will you waste it on vain and selfish avarice, smearing and slandering the people you encounter, and seeing all its obstacles or tools to your own inevitable glory, which will flicker out like a candle when your time on this earth ends? I can't answer that question for you, but I will know the answer when I meet you. And speaking of which, the young man has finished his ranting and has come to sit across from me. He smiles at me, but it is a smile without warmth, not like that old man years ago. I suppose it's just as well. I will write again when time permits, but now my time, and his, are up. Sincerely, Death.